The text message came through while I was reviewing case files at my desk. The casual tone somehow made the betrayal worse. Marcus had sent it like he was doing me a favor, like decluttering my apartment was an act of brotherly kindness rather than theft. Sold your guitars for rent money. Got $3,500 total from the pawn shop on 5th Street. We'll pay you back eventually, but you know how tight things are right now. You had way too many anyway. Nobody needs 6 guitars just sitting around collecting dust. I stared at the message, processing both the violation and the complete misunderstanding of what he'd just done. Those weren't just guitars. They were evidence in an ongoing federal investigation, protected assets placed in my custody as part of a major organized crime case I'd been working for the past 18 months. My phone rang almost immediately. Mom's number. Emma, I heard Marcus had to sell some of your things, she said without preamble, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when defending one child at the expense of another. I know you're upset, but you have to understand how desperate he is. The eviction notice came yesterday. He's got nowhere else to turn. He stole my property and sold it, I said evenly. He borrowed some guitars you weren't even using, she corrected. And it's not stealing when it's family. Marcus is going through a rough patch with the divorce and losing his job. The least you can do is help your brother when he's struggling. It was the same story I'd been hearing for 6 months. The expensive divorce, the lost sales job, the overdue rent. You have too many hobbies anyway, Mom continued. All those guitars and music equipment sitting around like some kind of storage unit. At least now they're helping family instead of gathering dust. I understand, I said, the standard response when family made decisions about my life without consulting me. Marcus feels terrible about it, but what choice did he have? You never play them when we visit. It's not like you're some professional musician. He needed the money more than you needed 6 guitars cluttering up your space. After hanging up, I sat in silence. Those guitars weren't just personal property. They were evidence in United States versus Richardson, a case against a smuggling network trafficking pre-Columbian artifacts inside vintage musical instruments. Each guitar contained hidden compartments and forensic traces that linked them to looted archaeological sites. They weren't worth $3,500, they represented $1.4 million in evidence. My official title was Financial Crimes Analyst with the FBI's Art Crime Team, though my family thought I worked as a low-level data clerk at an accounting firm. They had never asked questions, and I had never corrected them. Marcus was always the golden child, I was the quiet one with too many hobbies. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. Pawn shop guy said they're probably worth more than what he paid, but he did me a solid taking them all at once. Might be able to get a better price somewhere else with the receipt. The casual tone made it clear, he had no idea what he'd done. I called my supervisor, Agent Sarah Rodriguez. Someone sold your evidence guitars, she repeated, her voice sharp with disbelief. How is that even possible? My brother had a key to my apartment. He's facing eviction and thought he was helping himself to some unused guitars. Christian, this is a massive security breach. Those instruments are central to our case against the Richardson network. We need them back immediately. I know. I'm working on it. Working on it? This isn't something you work on. This is something you fix today. The U.S. Attorney's Office is going to lose their minds when they find out evidence in a federal case was pawned by your brother. Agents rushed to 5th Street Pawn with a warrant. They recovered 4 guitars, but 2 had already been resold. The pawn shop owner, Jerry Kowalski, was cooperative but pale when he realized he'd received stolen federal evidence. By late afternoon, Rodriguez called me back. We've got 4. The other 2 are with collectors who are cooperating. But your brother is in serious trouble, Chin. The U.S. attorney wants to charge him with theft of federal evidence, obstruction of justice, and interfering with a federal investigation. Felonies. 10 to 15 years if convicted. This is not going away. That evening, Marcus called. His usual confidence was gone. Emma, FBI agents came to my apartment. They said those guitars were evidence in some federal case. What the hell is going on? You sold federal evidence, I told him. What? No, they were just guitars in your apartment. They were evidence in my custody. I'm a financial crimes analyst with the FBI's Art Crime Team. Those guitars contained hidden compartments used to smuggle artifacts. You selling them is a federal crime. Silence. Then, you work for the FBI. Yes. And now you're facing federal charges. His breathing grew uneven. Emma, you have to help me. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. You're my sister, you can't let them send me to prison. I can't make charges disappear. You committed federal crimes. But I'm family. Doesn't that count for something? The rest of the conversation swung between panic and anger. He blamed me for not labeling the guitars as evidence, for not telling the family about my real job, for not stopping him. It was everyone's fault but his own. 3 days later, the family held an emergency meeting at Mom and Dad's house. We need to discuss what's happening with Marcus, Dad announced grimly once everyone had gathered in the living room. This FBI situation is completely out of hand. Marcus sat slumped in his chair, looking like he hadn't slept since the agent's visit. Mom hovered nearby with tissues and soothing pats on his shoulder, while Dad paced the room with barely contained anger. Emma, Dad said, stopping in front of me, how exactly did Marcus get in trouble for selling guitars? This whole story makes no sense. He sold federal evidence in an ongoing criminal investigation, I replied calmly. Evidence? They were guitars in your apartment. Personal property. They were evidence in my custody as part of my job with the FBI. Uncle Robert leaned forward. The FBI? You work for the FBI? Yes, I said evenly. Art crime team. I'm a financial crimes analyst specializing in cultural property crimes and antiquities trafficking. The room went silent as everyone processed this. You work for the FBI? Mom repeated slowly, as though saying the words might force them to make sense. For the past 4 years. The guitars Marcus sold were evidence in a smuggling case involving stolen artifacts worth millions. Dad sank into a chair. Why didn't you ever tell us? You all assumed I did data entry at an accounting firm. No one ever asked for details about my actual job. Marcus finally spoke, his voice sharp. She's lying. She made this up to get me in trouble for selling her stupid guitars. Without a word, I pulled out my FBI credentials and set them on the coffee table. The badge and ID clearly displayed my name, photo, and title. Dad picked them up with shaking hands. Financial Crimes Analyst. Art Crime Team. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The guitars contained hidden compartments used to smuggle pre-Columbian artifacts, I explained. They're evidence in United States versus Richardson, a case against a network of dealers operating across 3 states. Selling them is a federal crime, regardless of Marcus' intentions. But his family, Mom protested. Surely that makes a difference. You can explain it was an innocent mistake. Federal evidence protocols don't have exceptions for family. Marcus committed federal crimes when he sold those guitars. Uncle Robert stared at me, shock mingling with something that looked like respect. How long have you been working these kinds of cases? 4 years with the art crime team. 6 years with the bureau total. I started in financial crimes before specializing in cultural property. The discussion dragged on for 2 hours as everyone tried to reconcile their image of me as the underachieving sibling with the reality of my career. Dad asked pointed questions. Mom struggled to process it. Marcus grew increasingly agitated. This is all Emma trying to make herself look important while I face federal prison, Marcus snapped. She could make this go away if she wanted. No, Marcus. I can't make federal charges disappear. You committed serious crimes. They were just guitars. They were $1.4 million worth of federal evidence in a major criminal investigation. The next morning, Agent Rodriguez called with an update. The U.S. Attorney's Office is willing to consider a plea agreement, she reported. Full cooperation, restitution for investigation costs, and 5 years probation instead of prison. But your brother has to admit guilt and provide complete testimony. What kind of restitution? I asked. Approximately $200,000, to cover recovery, reauthentication, and rebuilding parts of the case, plus court and administrative fees. When I relayed this to Marcus, his reaction was predictable, a mix of outrage and relief. $200,000? How am I supposed to pay that? I don't even have rent money. It's better than 15 years in federal prison, I pointed out. Can't you help me with the money? You work for the FBI, you must make decent money. I'm not paying restitution for crimes you committed. But I'm your brother. And this is partly your fault for not telling me about your job. The conversation spiraled the way all conversations with Marcus did: self-pity, anger, blame. Everyone's fault but his own. The family reacted the way I expected. Dad said the restitution was excessive. Mom insisted there must be a way to reduce penalties for what she still called an innocent mistake. Maybe if Emma explains that Marcus is a good person, Mom suggested on another family call. The FBI doesn't reduce charges based on character references, I explained. And my connection to Marcus only makes this case more complicated. Over the following weeks, family dynamics shifted. Dad asked genuine questions about my work. Mom struggled to reconcile her old perceptions with reality. Uncle Robert seemed almost intimidated. Marcus eventually accepted the plea deal: probation and wage-garnished restitution over 15 years. A constant reminder of consequences. 6 months later, the Richardson network was convicted on multiple charges. The guitar evidence proved crucial. Agent Rodriguez commended me in my performance review. Not many agents could stay objective when family compromises a case. Your handling of the breach was exemplary. The family changed in small but permanent ways. Dad respected my career. Mom stopped making assumptions about my success. Marcus stayed bitter, but at least employed. Once, he asked me again, "I still don't understand why you never told us about your real job." Because it didn't matter what you thought. I didn't need approval to succeed in federal law enforcement. But if I'd known, I never would have sold the guitars. If you'd asked before taking my property, you would have learned they weren't mine to sell. The most important change was in how the family viewed success. No more assumptions based on lifestyle. No more lectures about ambition. And no more treating property as communal just because of family need. Federal law doesn't recognize family emergencies. And $1.4 million worth of evidence isn't just guitars gathering dust. Some lessons come with permanent consequences, including felony convictions and 15 years of restitution payments.